Hello, Ambius. Thank you for joining us for the February Connection. To start things out with safety, we will cover the OSHA review of situational awareness. Situational awareness is basically being aware of what is going on around you. The objective is for you to focus on where you are and whether something or someone is a threat to your safety. If you think of it as a process, it can be divided up into three parts. Part one would be your perception of the current environment. What do your senses tell you? What do you see, hear, smell, or touch? The second part is determining if there is a hazard. The third part is understanding what action to take, what will happen next. We all apply this process regularly and often without even a conscious thought. For example, you're driving and it starts to rain, so you put on your wiper blades and you reduce your speed. You identified rain as a hazard, so you use wiper blades and speed reduction as a reaction to the hazard. It would be great if things were always that simple and that obvious. It would be great if we could do our jobs with very few distractions and very few hazards. The reality is that distractions and hazards are the norm for all of us working for Ambius. There are hazards over your head and under your feet. There are moving hazards like traffic, forklifts, and our own equipment. We visit lots of different customers with different furnishings and different displays. We walk around various surfaces in various weather conditions. Situational awareness means that you stay focused on your current environment. It means you're in the moment, so you can react safely to various changes and surprises throughout the day in all these different places that you go. It's safer for you and it's better for your customer if you stay focused on the situation you're in at the time and not distracted by where you're going next. If you're at the Apple store, be aware and focused on that surrounding and what's happening while you're there. Don't be distracted by your next stop at Aritzia. Walking while talking on the phone in unfamiliar areas can reduce your safety. These conversations can reduce your focus on your surroundings and make you more vulnerable to hazards. Earbuds and headphones can also reduce your safety. It filters out sounds that might be important links to hazards. Think of situational awareness as an on-the-job safety skill. It's a focus that's critical to help you identify hazards and to make quick decisions if you need to react to that hazard. There is not an instruction manual to guide you through every possible scenario of hazards throughout the day. There is good advice, and that advice is stay focused and use your situational awareness skills. Here's a quick review. What do you sense about your environment? Are there any hazards? And what are you going to do about the hazard? Situational awareness is a form of accident prevention. It will help you go home safe every day. Thanks for your time and attention.
Hello, Ambius. A quick recap on what we talked about in January. If you recall, we were pruning pothos in green walls in ways of keeping those pothos vines tamed so that ultimately we have easier green wall to take care of, less maintenance, longer lasting plants, and hopefully happier customers. We also highlighted the pothos plant, the number one plant that we use, and it's also a very popular house plant. This month, we're going to start taking a look at Safari 20SG. This is a really great pesticide for interior scapers. It is available in the United States. Unfortunately, it's not available in Canada. For those of you in Canada, please watch the presentation. and consider some of the points we're going to talk about when it comes to mixing products. And it's probably the most valuable pesticide to interior scapers because it works on 3 of our 4 major pests. It's probably the best pesticide that you can use for mealybug, soft scale, hard scale, and fungus gnats. And really the only pest that we have that this doesn't work on is mites. So Safari is not useful for mites, but it is very useful for our other pests. It's very effective, and it can be used multiple ways. It can be used as a foliar spray, and it can also be used as a systemic pesticide. And that's really nice in interior scapes because not having to spray means you can save a great deal of time. And it's also very effective as a systemic. So this product is extremely useful to us in interior scapes. This product is not cheap. In fact, this container right here that I have, 3 pounds, can easily go for over $500 nowadays. So it is expensive, but it's definitely worth that money if you use it properly. I've noticed from time to time that people are not mixing this product correctly. And I want to show the effects of what happens if you don't mix this stuff up properly. In short, what happens is it doesn't dissolve in water if it's not stirred properly. And if you don't stir it properly, then the product is not diluted in water and it's an ineffective application. This is the Safari 20 SG, and I've got 1/4 teaspoon right here, and I'm going to put it on the palm of my hand. You can see the pellets are quite small, and they have a coating on them. It's kind of like a candy coating, like coating on an M&M. And the reason for this coating is to protect you and to protect the environment. So if this stuff had no coating on it and you opened up this container, kind of like Merit, they don't want you to inhale this product. If you inhale it, it's easily going to be distributed throughout the rest of your body. It is a systemic pesticide, so it moves very quickly in any type of liquid. So they don't want that to happen, so they put this coating on it. And that coating will protect you so that when you open the container, that material doesn't come out and you don't inhale it. It's also to protect the environment so that this stuff doesn't just easily dissolve right away in water. This stuff is extremely toxic to fish. Coating is good for protecting the environment and protecting people. It does make the mixing process a little more difficult, and it is very necessary for you to stir this properly so that that coating does dissolve and the product itself dissolves in water. The biggest mistake people make with Safari is they don't stir this properly and it doesn't dissolve in the water. Where I've seen people go wrong in the mixing process is the tool they use to stir the Safari with. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at these 3, and we're going to pretend that they are watering cans of mixing up the product. And what I'm going to do is on one of these, I'm not going to stir at all. We're just simply going to put the Safari into this water and see what happens. The second one, I'm going to mock what I see a lot of people doing, which is using a soil probe. So I've seen many people take a soil probe and use this to stir Safari 20 SG. And I think that is a big mistake. And the reason why is that they're just not able to stir the product properly like that. So to mimic this in this little container here, I'm going to use this little thermometer and stir it like that. The third cup I'm going to mimic using a proper stir spoon. If you are mixing this stuff, you really need a high quality stir spoon like this. So this is a metal serving spoon, and metal is, I would say a metal one is preferred, because it's more heavy duty and you're just going to be able to stir much more effectively. You could use a plastic one. Plastic is okay, but it's probably not quite as good as a metal one. I'm going to put a small amount of 1/4 of a teaspoon of Safari in here. And I'm not going to stir this one. I just want to show everyone what happens to the Safari when it actually goes into the water. And one of the things that you'll notice is that it's really not doing anything right away when you put it in the water. I mean, typically we want to use this right away, and you'll notice that it's just kind of sitting there. On this one, we're going to add the same amount of Safari, and we're going to use this little needle, this thermometer right here, to actually stir it up. And this is going to mock basically what a soil probe would do. So we'll give this a try and see what happens. And you'll notice that by stirring it like that, it looks like maybe a little bit of the product has dissolved, but most of the rest of it is just kind of settled back down. So so far we didn't get a great mix on this. That's a big deal when you're mixing up $50, $100 worth of product and you're trying to control mealybug or scale on large ficus trees. So here's the one that we didn't stir at all. And you can see it's just kind of sitting there at the bottom. And then again here's the one that we did stir with, like the soil probe type thing. So there's definitely a lot of material in there that hasn't dissolved yet. So we're going to put the same amount of Safari in this one, and this time we're going to stir with a substantial spoon. And watch while I stir this, because this is the way I would recommend you stir something when it's a pesticide. So what we're going to do is we'll take again the Safari, put the same amount in. Okay. When we stir it, we're going to go this way, and then what we're going to do is we're going to stop and go the other way. And that's a really good way of stirring. If you just keep going in the same direction, you kind of get a whirlpool effect, and that's not real good when you're stirring. Otherwise, you know, everything just kind of keeps going in the same direction. It doesn't really mix when you keep going too much. So just stop every once in a while, do that kind of like a baffle plate. It's worth spending the extra 10 or 20 seconds stirring properly, because this is the difference between controlling scale or mealybug or not controlling scale or mealybug. You will see suds, but don't think that just because you see suds that's enough. Suds are a good sign, but just make sure that you stir kind of the way I was. Go one way, slow it down, go back the other way, slow it down, go back the other way. Try to do that at least a couple times. All right, so now after doing that, I don't see anything, which means it is now dissolved in the water. So the Safari 20SG is mixed and is inside of this water. This will now work its way up into the plant and control mealybug and scale. So if you're applying this as a systemic, this will be very effective, and if you're applying it as a spray, same thing. All right, so here we are looking above. This is the one that I mixed thoroughly with the larger spoon, and you can see there's no pellets visible. Really nothing visible at all. And that's a sign that the material has dissolved in the water and is now ready
to do its thing in the plant. That is different than the other ones. So let's go back to the ones we were just looking at. This is the one that we didn't stir at all. And you can see the residue down at the bottom there. So this is not dissolved in the water. Most of the product is just sitting at the bottom of the container. And if you were to use this as a systemic, this would not be an effective application. I think one of the most common reasons why Safari doesn't work is because it's just simply not mixed properly. And this is an easy mistake to avoid if you just simply mix it properly. So that's the one that we didn't mix at all. And then now let's go to the one where people mix it with the soil probes. So that would be this one here. And you can see it's really not much different than the one that wasn't mixed at all. It looks like the material is just kind of in the center of the container right there and isn't really going anywhere. So you can see that it appears just to be sitting down at the bottom of the container and nothing is really happening to it. So if you have ever used Safari and mixed it with a soil probe, this is probably what happens. And so, you know, the material is just stuck down at the bottom. But when you do get it, one thing I would really suggest you do is that you take a Sharpie and put the date on there. You can see this one we got in February of 2018. And it's almost February 2023, which means this product is pushing 5 years old. And this product will easily last 5 years. It might last a little bit longer. We're almost out of material. You know, there's hardly any left. But I do recommend that you do that because sometimes people will end up with a lot of pesticides in their cabinet and not have any idea as to how old it is. You don't want to use pesticides that are 10, 15, 20 years old. While we're on the topic of Safari, I do also get a lot of questions about the proper rate. I want to go over that real quick. So we've got the label here on the container. I'm going to open up the label. If we want to spray, so not use this as systemic, but actually spray this on the leaves of the plant, foliar or broadcast spray application for indoors, not outdoors, because there's a different rate for outdoors. Indoors, it's going to give us a rate per gallon, which is good because we're not using 100 gallons. I think this is where people get kind of confused. It gives you a rate for much larger volumes, but down here at the bottom, this is a really nice thing about Safari, is they actually do give you the rate per gallon of water. So for treatment of small areas, it's 1/2 to 1 teaspoons per gallon of water. So you could make a lot of gallons of spray with this container here. That's part of the reason why this is so expensive. This material goes really, really far. So that's the rate if you're going to spray indoors. Okay, and now let's go to the next page, and you don't have to memorize this because you have the label here. You always can look this up. I've looked this up hundreds of times, and I always go back to the label every single time. Okay, so now on this next page, ornamental plants, application to soil. So this is the rate you're going to use if you're going to apply it to the soil. And there's a couple examples of that. One is if you're treating for fungus gnats. You would be applying this as a springe to the soil. The second is the most common example that we use for mealybug and scale as a systemic. We're going to apply the product again to the soil. So for that, we're going to go 1.5 to 3 teaspoons per gallon. Now you notice that there's a range, and a lot of times on labels they'll give you a range and you might wonder which one do you use. The lowest rate, the 1.5 teaspoons per gallon, is if you have a light infestation or are using it as a preventative. The high rate is what you would use if you have a heavy infestation. So if you already have a decent amount of scale or mealybug, you would use the higher rate. If you are using this for fungus gnats, no matter what, I would always recommend going at the lower rate. You actually don't need very much product for fungus gnats. But if you are treating larger plants, especially trees, for things like mealybug and scale, I would suggest the 3 teaspoons per gallon. And 3 teaspoons equals 1 tablespoon per gallon. What we're going to do now is actually mix some of this up in a watering can. And so as to not waste product, we're going to mix at the lower rate of 1.5 teaspoons per gallon. We're going to mix up 2 gallons worth of material. So that'll be 1.5 times 2. So we're going to mix up 3 teaspoons per 2 gallons of water. We're going to show you now how to do that. Soil probe is the most important tool you have, but this is not for mixing up pesticides. Very, very important. Okay, so what we need to do this, we got a watering can, we've got our pesticide, the Safari 20 SG. We also, importantly, we have our measuring spoons. Make sure that you have measuring spoons. Don't guess as to how much product you need. It's not a bad idea to have a 3rd or 4th pair of these because they're easy to lose. And then finally, we want to make sure that we have a heavy-duty servicing spoon like this. Something very big that you can stir the product with very effectively. The bigger, the more you mix up, the bigger a thing you need to make sure you agitate this. In fact, when growers are mixing up their pesticides, they actually use a motorized agitator. You certainly don't have to use a water machine, but if you have a lot to do, you certainly can fill up your water machine with water. That's what we have here. So we're going to use our water machine to fill this up. So when you are mixing this up, on the label, so you notice I stopped there. When you're mixing this up, on the label it says to 1/2 of the way full, and then add your product. You don't want to add all of your water and add the product to that and mix it. It's easier and more effective to mix it if you don't have the container completely filled. So we put in a little under a gallon worth of water. So now we're ready to put our pesticide in. So here is our Safari 20 SG. Now we had 3 teaspoons, so I'm just going to go ahead and do 3 individual teaspoons. There's not a whole lot of product left, so okay, so there's 1 teaspoon. Two. 3 teaspoons. This is what we don't want to do. I see many people doing this. They take a soil probe and they mix it up like this. You might mix it up a little bit with the soil probe, but you're not going to mix it up very well using something like this. So don't use your soil probe for this. Use it for checking soil moisture and not for mixing up pesticides. Here we have our big stir spoon. So when you're mixing this up, stir in one direction, then go back. Go back the other way. Okay. Go back the other way. Okay, and then go back this way one more time. Okay. Now that we have all that mixed properly, we'll go ahead and add the rest of our water. So we're going for 2 gallons. So we have about a gallon in there. We're going to add that final gallon in, and you'll notice there's a lot of suds. And that doesn't always make it real easy to see how much material you have in there. So just keep that in mind, that you will get quite a few suds. Okay, I think we're just about there. Yep, I think we have 2 gallons in. Doesn't have to be perfect, just get as close as you can. And then now, once again, get out our heavy-duty stir spoon, and we're gonna stir. Do the same exact thing again. Okay, now we're ready to use this as a systemic. This material is very expensive, but if you use it properly, believe me, it's very much worth the money if you do it properly. Just take a little extra time and you'll really get some good results with Safari 20SG.
So just to summarize again the main points we've made. So first we're going to add half of the amount of water that we need into our watering can. We're then going to add the proper amount of Safari 20SG to that water. We're then going to agitate with a large serving spoon, and we're going to agitate really well, going back and forth several times in each direction. Then we're going to add the remaining amount of water that we need, and then we're going to agitate yet again. So the thorough agitation is really important, lots of suds. And then in February, what we're going to do is once we've mixed this stuff, we're actually going to show you how to apply it. So we're going to go over a couple types of applications, including the Sprenching application for fungus gnats. This is really good news for those of you in the warehouse. And then we're also going to talk about applications for systemic drench as well as sprays. That will then take us to our plant of the month. And this month we'll highlight ficus. And there's so many types of ficus that I won't be able to do all of them this month, so we'll have to break this up into a couple parts. But a little background about all ficus. Ficus trees are native to tropical areas all throughout the world. And they are a fast-growing tree, and that's why they require lots of water and also lots of light. And you might wonder, why do they lose their leaves so easily? And the main reason for that is that they are detecting going into a dry season. So many tropical places throughout the world have a wet season and a dry season. And during that dry season, they detect it getting drier. And so they will start to shed their leaves, very similar to the way our trees in temperate climates will sense fall coming along in winter, and they'll shed their leaves in the fall in anticipation of the cold winter. For February, I will focus on the ficus trees that tend to have the smaller leaves. All of us are familiar with the Ficus benjamina, the weeping fig. Very, very common indoors, although it is being replaced by lots of other types of ficus trees. And the Ficus benjamina is quite finicky. Of all the ficus trees, this is kind of the king when it comes to losing leaves very quickly. Next up is Ficus nitida. And this is the main tree that we use in apple stores. Pretty good tree. It holds on to its leaves better than Ficus benjamina. It has kind of a smooth, lighter colored trunk, and it has leaves that are thicker than Ficus benjamina. It's a really good tree, except for one thing: it can get Cuban laurel thrips. Our last ficus of mention today is the Ficus moklame. And this is a newer ficus. It's kind of been around for about the last 5, maybe 10 years or so. You'll probably start seeing this one more often. It's got a rounder leaf, and it too has kind of a thick, rubbery leaf to it. And the Ficus moklame, although it can lose its leaves, it holds its leaves a lot better than Ficus benjamina. That'll do it for us on the safety and technical side for this month of February. We do look forward to seeing you in March, and we thank you for taking time to join us.